Hello, hello. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. How's everyone doing today? I'm making sure everything looks healthy. Hello. I almost heard myself twice there. I do apologize. How's everyone doing today? I see Steve, Nick, Financial Market, Star Academy Gaming, Zol, Geek Up, the Crochet Lady, Lily Tree. Lily, I haven't heard or seen you in a while. How are you doing? Can you guys hear me okay? Mike Phillips in the house. If you can hear me okay, give me a smiley face or a thumbs up. Let me know. Nick, hello, handsome host, shout out. What's going on, Nick? I appreciate that. We got my buddy Neil, the Urban Explorer, in the house. DIY Solar, JR, how are you guys doing today? It's so good to see everyone here. It has been a while since I've been able to get on to, hopefully you guys can hear me okay. Hopefully everything sounds and looks okay. I got to remember, I've got my webcam in a new place, and so lots of smiley faces coming on. That's what I like to hear. International Defense, doing great. Perfect. That's all I want to hear, is that if it sounds good, I really can only do so much as far as looking good. Really, that's all, genetics and whatever. So sounding good. I got to make sure I'm sounding good. That's the goal. It's good to see all of you guys. Hello, everyone from France. Let me know where everyone is coming from today in the chat. Also, let's get a bunch of likes on the stream. The more likes we get on the stream, the more the algorithm, again, we don't necessarily know that, but go ahead and like the stream anyways. Andrew Can, the man in the house. What's up, Andrew? Hopefully you're doing well today. I know it's early for you on the other end of the country. I see Eric, Modern Day Tech, in the house. How are you guys doing today? Hopefully everyone is doing well. I'm trying to see. You guys are a couple of 30 to 45 seconds behind me, so I just now am seeing the different locations from where everyone's coming from. So it's good to see everyone today. I was making sure my stream was set up appropriately. I've got my webcam here the way that I want it, but I got to remember to look at the webcam, not necessarily at my other screen. So we got New York City, we got Las Vegas, we got France, we got India, California, we got DC in the house. We've got people coming in from all over the world, which is just so much fun for me to have that happen. So that's super cool. I do apologize. At the beginning of the stream, you may have heard myself repeat myself. It's because I had the stream up testing it. I do apologize. Philippines, Italy. A lot of people were saying before we went live, I'm on the East Coast. A lot of the other streamers on our TubeBuddy team, which, by the way, we have a rock star team of content creators. Everybody from Owen and Nick and Brian, all the ladies that we've brought on recently, who I haven't gotten to get to know as well, but they're killing it as well. And so it's so good to see you guys. Colombia, Pakistan. Wow, we got folks coming in from everywhere. Well, we're going to go ahead and get this show on the road. If you don't know who I am, my name is Dusty Porter. I host ladies. That's right. We got a ton of amazing ladies on there on the TubeBuddy team. So it's awesome. So if you don't know who I am, I actually host the YouTube Creators Hub podcast, as well as the TubeBuddy Express show that I host for the TubeBuddy team here. So not only am I a YouTuber, content creator for video, one of my passions is definitely audio content, is podcasting. Rush, how are you? It's good to see you. Haven't heard or seen you in a while. So it's so good to see all of these not old faces, but people I haven't spoken with in a while. So it's really exciting to see all of you guys back in action, or me back in action. I think the last time I streamed on TubeBuddy was a while ago, and so it's super exciting to be here today. I know it's a little early for you West Coasters, but because of that, that's okay. The other folks, like in the other across the pond, it's going to be easy for them. D90, hey bro, meet you again. Hello everyone. Hello, how are you? It's so nice to talk to you as well. So again, like I was stating, my name is Dusty Porter. I host the YouTube Creators Hub podcast and podcasters, the TubeBuddy Express show. You can see right here beside me the two logos of the two shows that I do. Always listening to your podcast, says Rosh. Thank you. I appreciate that. It means a lot to me. And so today, we are going to be, Lily says podcast, one of those things still on my to-do list. Well, I hope today you're able to maybe get a couple of tips and pointers that can help you push you over the edge. Nick says, your voice is so good to listen to. I love it. Thank you, Nick. I appreciate that. You're being very, very kind. That means a lot to me. But yes, I will pull up the podcast here. If I can pull it up on iTunes here. I had iTunes up because I was going to show you guys a couple of things within iTunes. But if we switch over to my desktop here, we're going to be able to see here, this is the show that I do here, the YouTube Creators Hub podcast. You can tell here, I've got 184 episodes, and about 150 of those are interviews with other creators. And you can see here my other show, the TubeBuddy Express podcast. This is the one that I host for TubeBuddy, all the way up to 156 episodes now. And those are numbers that I'm very, very proud of. So we're going to hop back over here. But yeah, those are some things that I'm very proud of. So if you have any questions about podcasting or about podcasting as a YouTuber, which is the thing that I kind of am going to cover today as far as kind of making the jump or the transition from, say, video content to audio content. A lot of times people think that it's just basically copy and paste. Okay, well, I'm going to copy the content that I do over on YouTube, and I'm going to paste that over onto my podcast. I'm going to repurpose it, right? That's not necessarily the most successful or the most, I guess you would say, suggested way to do a podcast. And so we're going to kind of dive deep into that this week to kind of figure out kind of what you can do to best serve your audience in both audio form and video form. Now, if you do have a video, if you have a question, I would appreciate it if you would submit it to the form that Andrew has just put into chat there. That will be very helpful to me, that I can go through there and really see, all the questions that you guys may have. So if you have any questions, put those in the little Google form that Andrew Can is putting in chat there. That way, when as I'm going through the stream, I can look and see the different responses of things that maybe you have asked me. Adriana says, which is the difference between a YouTube channel and a YouTube podcast? Hopefully through this stream today, we will be able to answer that question for you. So that's kind of the goal today, is to do that. Now, I will say this, as with every stream that we do, if you ask generic questions like, how do I get so many subs, or how do I get this or that, very generic questions like that, honestly, there's too much amazing content on YouTube for you to be asking those questions here. I would like more detailed questions as far as that goes. So let's go ahead and dive into today's topic, which is podcasting. So let's go ahead and jump into it. So you've got an idea and you want to start a podcast. What are the reasons as to why you may want to start a podcast? Well, number one, let's say you have more longer form content. So let's say the content that you produce or create maybe is getting towards the 20 to 30 to 45 minute range. And that content maybe is better suited for a conversational style. So let's just say you want to do something that, let's say you're a crochet channel or you're a crafts channel, but you're seeing that your tutorial videos, your vlog videos are doing well, but you want something, a different type of content that you can kind of supplement, that you can go alongside your YouTube channel that would be more longer form, and you could be more conversational, maybe even bring on an interview guest or a guest to the show and interview them and bring their audience, which is another thing we're going to cover here briefly. And so maybe that's the reason why you want to do a podcast. Number two would be just to broaden your reach. Now, if you're covering stuff on YouTube, if you're doing stuff with your video content, that's fantastic. But, a lot of times people ask me, well, don't the same people who watch your YouTube videos, aren't those the same people who are listening or consuming your podcast? The answer to that question is no. You would be surprised at how many people come to my live streams on my YouTube channel, which I do frequently, try to, a little more sporadically than I probably should, but they come to my stream and they're like, oh my goodness, you're the Dusty from the YouTube podcast. They had no idea that basically I was the same person who was doing the podcast. They were listening to the podcast. Sorry, I don't mean to shake my webcam, but I talk with my hands, so I do apologize. They had no idea I was the same person. And so a lot of times you're going to be getting a new viewer or listener, or a person that could possibly buy your course, a person that could buy your merch, or a person that could support you on one of your crowdfunding platforms. Now, I did want to cover this topic. I have a Google page here that I'm looking that I took my notes that I wanted to cover today. One of the main things that came through the pipeline the past week or two was the whole thing with verification, and I'm not going to talk about that today. That's something that other TubeBuddy hosts will do a much better job than me. But with things like that, the new partner program, things that you have to do to be able to become a partner and monetize your content, I preach this all the time on my podcast. If you are relying on YouTube to be your sole provider, not only for monetary things such as, what's up, Shelly? How are you? Welcome to the stream. That's another one of our TubeBuddy hosts there in the chat. Shelly Saves the Day. Definitely go check her out if you haven't already. But so many things happen in the YouTube ecosystem to where everyone flips their lid when YouTube makes a change or makes something that could affect them and their content and the viewers that they're getting. What I always tell people is, why would you want to rely on a third-party platform? Now, obviously, when you're producing podcasts, you're relying possibly on iTunes, you're relying on the algorithm there just slightly, but not anywhere near like you are with YouTube. And if you have a website where you're putting all of your podcasts and your videos and things like that, it's one of those things where, as a podcaster, it's amazing to go through and kind of have something that is yours, right? Like, you pay for the hosting, you do all the audio, all of that. And so with that being said, it's one of those things to where I want to encourage you, don't rely so much on just one platform. It's okay to branch off. Now, you don't want to get so many different branches where you're trying so many different things to where you can't focus and do something. It's one of those things to where I want you guys to understand that podcasting, I always use the analogy, different branches coming down from a tree. You want to have as many different branches as you possibly can and still have the roots intact, the roots as strong as possible, and that trunk to be as wide as possible. And so with that being said, think of this as an extension of your YouTube channel. So those are a couple of reasons as to why you may want to start a podcast, more long-term content. And the last thing that I always tell and preach to people is that it's more of an intimate relationship with the listener. When you're watching a video, and you guys know this, trying to rank over on YouTube, people's attention spans, I mean, you think about this, right? Like when you have your phone and you're scrolling through YouTube and you're going on and you're watching a video, if it's not something that just strikes your attention really fast, you're going to swipe up, you're going to go to the next video, right? Now, on a podcast, it's much harder to do, right? On a podcast, it's one of those things to where you're listening to it, you put your headphones in and you go work out, you go for a walk, I took a walk this morning, I listened to a 30-minute podcast. It's one of those things where it's a much more intimate relationship with the people who are consuming the content. So it's one of those things to where I see people, if watch time was a thing or listen time on a podcast, I think I'd be killing it because I know and have heard from people who listen to episode after episode after episode of my podcast, one after the other. They discover the show, they listen from episode 1 all the way to 150 something or whatever we're at now, and that's amazing. That's you're gaining that trust every episode they listen to. So it's good to see everyone in here. Art by April, Midnight Madness 4x4. It's good to see all of you guys in here. Susie, the realtor, I appreciate you guys stopping by today. Don't forget to like the stream. I would really, really appreciate that. All right, so let me know in chat, what are your favorite podcasts? Let me know in chat. Just hit me with some podcasts. It doesn't have to be YouTube related. It doesn't have to be business related. Let me know, what podcasts are you listening to, just in case you guys were curious. Not that you were. A couple of my favorites are, I like to listen to the Tim Ferriss Show. I listen to Smart Passive Income from Pat Flynn. And my buddy Nick Nimmin just released a podcast. The name of it is escaping me. And so it's coffee something. You need to go Nick Nimmin on iTunes. You'll find him there. It's amazing. I listen to a couple of gaming podcasts because that's something that I do on the side as well. It's a hobby of mine. Modern Day Tech says YouTube Creators Hub, of course. Comments Over Coffee, that's Nick's podcast. That's another great one. Armchair Expert with Dax, that's a good one too. Cemetery Confessions and more. Okay, those are cool. Nerdcast, Boxing Known. I love podcasts about neuromarketing, neurocells. Nice. Approachable with Samantha. Nice. Well, I appreciate that. I'm ready to listen to your podcast. Great. Andrew says, my girlfriend loves Dak's podcast. Shelly say, yeah. I've listened to a couple of episodes. I have to kind of really, I guess you would say, tone down how many podcasts I subscribe to because I just don't have time to listen to all of them. But there's a lot of good ones out there. The beauty of podcasting is this, right? Let's say you have a new hobby. Something that that me and my daughter like to do, and she's getting more into it, is I've always been into gaming and nerd culture and things like that, but I've never really been too much into comic books. But there's some young girl comic books that I've kind of gotten my daughter into, and she's all about playing Supergirl and flying around the house with a cape and all that. Well, I was interested if there was a podcast about comic books, and obviously there's tons of them out there. But I think I make my point of, if you find something or you have a new hobby that you're getting into, say you're getting into cross-stitching or you are getting into YouTube, right? Like, you can search iTunes, search the internet, and find, or go to Reddit and say, hey, what's your favorite podcast on X topic? There's going to be something out there. And you begin to actually create and form a relationship with those people. Dan from Creator Fundamentals in the house. How are you, Dan? It's good to see you. It has been a while. For those of you who don't know, my second daughter, Millie, was born about a little over 6 months ago, and I had a couple of kind of scheduling conflicts, and Andrew and the team were so nice and gracious to actually allow me to last minute cancel and get away from it, the stream, for a couple of months. And we've got a new schedule now, but I'm so excited to be back here today. This is awesome. You guys, I didn't think there'd be that many of you in here, but you guys are coming in here. I see Dr. Sten. How are you doing today? It's good to see you. Congrats. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, she is. She's a mess, and it's so fun. Kids definitely, they open your eyes to a completely different element. So it's awesome. So all right, we've got the reason, the why, the how as to why we want to do a podcast. Now let's talk about the actual nitty-gritty of starting a podcast. Now, there are many different things out there, many different things on YouTube. So if we go to YouTube and go to how to start a podcast, there's going to be a ton of different results out there, right? I know the person that I mentioned that I listened to his podcast right here. You can see here, I'm actually working on a video that's going to be basically the same thing here, where it's basically how to start a podcast, what you need, what you don't need, the hosting side of it, all of that thing. But you can go here. I recommend Pat Flynn. His stuff is really awesome, and he'll walk you through basically everything that you need. That's the beauty of YouTube, right? Is that it's YouTube education. So you can figure out how to start a podcast, but the basics are you need a microphone, right? Which is pretty self-explanatory, and you need a hosting provider. Now, what is a hosting provider? A hosting provider is someone where you can upload your audio to and then send the RSS feed out to the world, out to iTunes, out to Google Play, out to Stitcher, out to all of that, to where you can go and have your podcast out there for the world to listen to. So you need a microphone, maybe an audio interface, and you can get a free audio recording software like Audacity. I use Adobe Audition, just because I use that for my videos and whatnot. And so with all of that being the case, it's one of those things to where I highly recommend that you go out, see the things that you're going to need: microphone, audio hosting provider, which it varies from $10 to $20 a month. Again, it's so worth it. It's funny. This is basically new age radio, right? Like my parents listened to a lot of AM, FM radio. I still listen to AM radio. I'm a big sports fan, a huge sports fan, and so I listen to a lot of sports radio when I'm driving down the road. This is allowing you to have a platform to where you can have your own radio show. You can have your own radio show for basically once you get the equipment in-house for free. Like literally, you can have it all for free. And that is such a cool thing that you can do that. And so as far as starting a podcast, very, very simple, okay? So once you've done all of that, once you've got all the stuff and you've got the audio recorded, here's a couple of pointers, a couple of tips that I want to go through, and then we'll start taking and fielding questions. So number one, first tip is this: record a couple of test or beta episodes first to get your feet wet. You may think to yourself, I record videos all the time. Well, maybe you script your videos. Maybe you do this. I found the best podcasts are the ones where I have bullet points and I cover them, but I don't read directly from a script, because what happens is that people will listen to your show, and when you sound like this, hello guys, this is Dusty with the YouTube Creators Hub podcast. You sound like you're on a script. You don't want to sound scripted. You want to sound as if you're having a conversation with the person listening to your podcast. That's a huge deal. So you want to sound conversational. You want to sound like you know what you're talking about because you want to become an authoritative figure in the space that you're doing the podcast. So do a couple of beta episodes before that, right? Like reading, Adriana said, that's exactly right. Number 2, when you submit your podcast to iTunes for the world to listen to, I work with clients. I work with podcast clients. Probably I work with about 15 to 20 of them currently right now. Everyone that I ever launch, I always say this. Make sure you have at least 3 to 5 episodes that are live when you launch your podcast. Don't launch a podcast with 1 episode. There's something about going to a show page, right, and seeing, when you go over here to my podcast page over on YouTube Creators Hub here, and you're like, okay, let's go see if he's, it's a YouTube podcast. Oh, it's got over 200 reviews. It's got 184 episodes. That, my friend, is a huge deal. That's going to tell you that, hey, he is consistent, and it's one of those things to where they can go and see that. So I think that's super cool. So make sure you're launching your podcast with at least, 3 to 5 episodes to begin with. The third tip that I have jotted down here is that if you can, and your format of the show will fit for it, try to have a guest on the show at least once every 1, 2, or 3 episodes. Now, you may be saying, why do you do this? Well, why in the world would you want to collaborate on YouTube? There's tons of YouTube videos showing you why you would want to do that, okay? And so with that being said, it's one of those things to where it's like, if you collaborate with someone on a podcast, Andrew says, oh, I can, that's great. When you have someone as a guest on your podcast, not only are you utilizing your audience, you are also utilizing the other person's audience. And so what I do, and I like to do, and something I've worked on, is that I have a PDF, a 1-page PDF. Whenever I have someone on the show, I give them the PDF and I say, listen, use this PDF to share, right? Like, use this to tweet it, use this to put it on Facebook, use this to put it on Instagram. And I have someone actually designing me a revamped version of that as well. So when you're collaborating, you're utilizing 2 different audiences, and then you may get 5 new podcast listeners that are going to listen every week from that person. And so I think that's one of those things to where hopefully you guys can see the benefit in that as well. So those are kind of the tips that I would go with. There's a couple of other things as well, right? Like, try to have an intro and an outro. An intro and outro is something that's very easily. And lastly, I wanted to show you guys a new platform. Now, I'm not sponsored. TubeBuddy's not sponsored by them in any way. But if you're looking for an easy way to get your podcast out there is a website called anchor.fm where you can go to, and it basically does all of the work for you. So you go here and you see where it says make your podcast, you sign up there, and if you go here, you can look at the different features. You got one-click distribution, you can monetize your podcast, you can podcast together with friends, you can record it directly from your phone, it's got an episode builder directly built in. All of this is done here. Like, Anchor is literally a one-stop shop to where you can go in and do it that way. And so if you haven't checked already, check out Anchor. I think they're going to be something that would help you out. And it's got some tips on podcast as well. So it's really cool. Raj said host one of his podcasts there. Anchor is also partnered with Spotify. Anchor is really good. Yeah, lots of people have definitely. I use Libsyn. So I obviously recommend Libsyn, and I've got a video showing you how to do that as well. But Anchor, I got a fun little gaming nerd podcast that I'm doing with a buddy of mine, and we do it on Anchor, and Anchor literally does everything for you. And even if you want to switch to Anchor from your current host, if something you're having a issue with your host, you can do it over on Anchor, and they got videos showing you how to do everything. Eileen has a course on Anchor that shows how much she likes it. So if you really want to know how to use Anchor, go check out her course. She is wonderful. Her content is wonderful, and definitely go check her out if you haven't already. All right. So, Shelly said, I switched all my stuff. It's very easy. It shouldn't be that difficult. Yeah, it shouldn't be, it shouldn't be that hard at all. All right, so remember, if you would like to submit a question, we're about halfway through the stream now. You can do so. Andrew's about to post the Google form, just because I know he is, in the chat, in case you want to know where you can submit your question. Remember, I'm not going to be answering questions like, how do I get 10,000 subs? Yeah. Okay. There's the first question that I'm going to read out is coming from Sunny Health and Fitness. And I will tell you this, that I saved this point for this question because I honestly think this is probably one of the biggest points that we want to cover when it comes to doing podcast as a YouTuber. They say, we have a backlog of podcast episodes. How can these best be presented through YouTube? I've tested this once with an interview, but I find that I need to rely on motion graphics to keep it visually entertaining. Okay, so this is a very big, huge point. I want to show you something. This is, if I can find it over here on my, just excuse me while I thumb through something here. So I've tried to do my podcast on YouTube, and there's a couple of pros and cons as to why you would want to do it. So as you can see, when I was very much earlier on, 4 or 5 years ago, what I did here, as you can see on my desktop, is that I just put the static image over on my YouTube channel. Now, it would get a few hundred views, people would enjoy it, they would listen to it, but oftentimes I found that it didn't work. It was very, when people come to YouTube, they come to YouTube to watch videos, to be interacted with, not necessarily to have something that is just static, which is what this image is. It's just static, right? And so I found that when I do a live stream, so I have actually live streamed the podcast, those have done better because they're interactive and they can see a person talking back to forth. So I may be able to find one of those. Yeah, this one right here. Here's one that I did where I interviewed D. Nimmin, which is Nick's brother. As you can see here, he and I did an interview where I was, now this is very ugly looking. I didn't do any editing, or it was very early on when I was learning to stream. But as you can see, I got much more interaction out of this one, and the stream was actually very successful. And so as you can see here, it's just me and D talking as we go forward, and you can see it's basically, I took the recorded podcast, as you can see here. I kind of felt confident in that. Then I stepped up and I put myself on camera. So as you can see here, this is just an interview where I'm on one side, he's on the other. These have done better. Now, if you're looking to repurpose your content, I recommend you don't do it on your main channel. I recommend you start an actual YouTube channel that is the title of your podcast and offload everything there. I don't recommend that you do it on your YouTube channel. I am tinkering and testing all the time to see what works, but I think if I were to do a live stream of my podcast interview, sometimes I do 4 in a week. I didn't know if that was something I wanted to stream 4 times in a week. Some guests don't even want to be streamed on the channel. And so with that being said, it's one of those things to where you need to figure out what works best for you. But if you're wanting to repurpose stuff, I wouldn't just put an actual static image on, with the audio dubbed over top of it, because that's not interactive. That's not something that people want to see. A really, really good question. Really good question, by the way. All right, here we go. A Latte Fun Fishing asks, if I want a podcast from a location where there's a lot of background noise, what headphone and mic combo would you recommend? Oh, man, there is a lot of things that I would say on this. I'm a tech head. I'm a nerd. Honestly, what I would recommend is there's some stuff that you can plug into your iPhone or Android devices directly in USB-C. You can find those all over Amazon. But honestly, if you're not interviewing someone, if you're doing something like an on-camera thing where you're talking and you want to record the interview or the podcast there, I would get some type of on-person microphone like a Tascam. They have a bunch of great packets. I use those for when I film weddings. Shure, S-H-U-R-E, has a couple of really nice on-person packets that are very good. Make sure you get some of those wind filters or pop filters like what you see here, this little pop filter on top of my microphone. Those are the things that it's very important that you have a pop filter or a wind filter. And even when you're out on site, something that's important to remember is, you're going to have that wind. Just try to minimize it as possible, as much as possible. That would be my recommendations there. Great question, though. I have a lot of podcasters that I work with that actually do their podcast on site. I have one person who does tech shows and go all over to conventions and do it that way. And so that's kind of how it is. Jill Brown Fitness asked me, she says, Dusty, what is the platform you're using to stream right now? The name of this platform that I'm using is called Streamlabs OBS. If you are interested in learning how to use it, I've got a bunch of great tutorials on YouTube to show you how to do that. So does Nick, so does other people. And so it's free. Download Streamlabs OBS. I'm using it for Windows PC right now. Very, very easy. There's a mobile app as well. They'll get you up and running, and you'll be good to go. Dan said, I think I'm going to pack my gear and record some podcasts at Vid Summit. That would be cool. I can live vicariously through you. I have to admit, one of the big attractions of doing a podcast is not having to think about how I look. That's so important, right? Like, that's so important to have that be the case, right? Like, people always say, well, you got a radio face. My dad always jokes with me. He's like, you got a podcast face, right? Meaning that your face maybe isn't made for TV, right? There's a lot of people who maybe that's the case. Who knows, right? But great point and great question. I like your name, by the way. A lot of fun fishing. That's super cool. Next question coming in from Lily Tree says, what are the best ways to monetize your podcast? Another great question. One of the main ways to monetize is a podcast sponsorship. Now, a lot of people think that you have to have a ton of listeners or downloads to have a sponsorship. I'm getting tongue-tied. I apologize. That's not the case. Just as there are YouTube channels with just 5,000 subscribers making, a ton of money on YouTube, the same thing goes for podcasts. If you have an actionable audience, the numbers really don't matter. If that makes sense, right? Like if you have a trustworthy audience who trusts you, it's very important to do that. I'm getting distracted by the kind words from Neil and Andrew. I appreciate that, guys. It means a lot to me. It's good to be back here today. So podcast sponsorships, I'll tell you a little bit of a backstory. I approached Phil, which is one of the creators and founders and CEO of TubeBuddy. I approached him to come on the YouTube Creators Hub podcast over 3.5 years ago now. They've been the prime sponsor on that show from the beginning. The show was doing extremely well in my eyes. I was getting anywhere from 5, 10, 15,000 downloads an episode then. Now it's doing even better than that. The beauty of my podcast and a lot of podcasts is that they're evergreen, and people will go back and listen to my old episodes just as quickly as they'll go listen to my new episodes. Because you think about it, over the span of 5 years, I've interviewed 150 YouTubers. Like, the knowledge base of that podcast is amazing. I've built up this knowledge base of people that I've interviewed, and it's amazing. So now I may get 50 or 70,000 downloads per episode. And so the best way to do it is to email. I emailed Phil and said, hey, listen, I do a YouTube podcast. I think TubeBuddy would be a great fit for the show. Within the next day, he emailed me back. Within the end of the week, we already worked something up. And from that day on, we've done a really good deal. Now, TubeBuddy is I'm going to be honest with you guys, TubeBuddy is probably the best of both worlds, because not only am I able to get a sponsorship from them to be on the show and to advertise their products, but I'm also able to get affiliate earnings from them as well, which, as we know, creators, that's beneficial as well. And the affiliate program for TubeBuddy is one of the most generous ones out there. And so, with that being said, it's the best of both worlds. So reach out to partners. Make sure, if you're doing a motorcycle or a NASCAR-based podcast, reach out to automobile products and services and things like that could possibly benefit your users, your listeners as well. That's one way to monetize. Another way to monetize is through crowdfunding. So if you go to, I'm just going to be honest with you guys. If you go here to Patreon and we look here at this here, you can see my Patreon page. I'm not getting rich. I mean, I tell you, right here it is, $444 a month. That's not a lot of money. It's just not. But it allows me to put in the time that it takes to produce a fun and a productive podcast. And with Patreon, you're able to go through and offer things like, access to a Discord, access to do things like that. And so, Patreon is a great source of income to monetize your podcast. So there's a couple of different ways that you can do that. But what a great question. Thank you for asking that question. I really do like that question. Thank you, Lily. I'm going to take a sip of water here for a minute. All right. Trying to find a question here. All right, here we go. Adriana says, can we use SEO to increase the visibility of my podcast? Yes, you can. So if we go here to the podcast world, so let's go on over to iTunes right now. Just like Google and YouTube, right, is a search engine, so is iTunes. So when I go to the iTunes store and I go up here and I search for a YouTube and I hit search, it's going to pull up a bunch of different YouTube podcasts. Now, here's the YouTube Creators Hub podcast here, which I'm very proud that's one of the ones that's on there. So it's on the first page here. So if I click there, I can see that's a YouTube podcast. So you want to go, and when you go in and you're putting your keywords on your podcast, it works the same way as it would on Google or on YouTube. You want your keywords to be relative to what you're doing. And I find that bringing guests on the show, being able to diversify and expand the amount and type of keywords that you can put on a podcast has been very helpful and has helped me to grow the show. And if you go to my podcast, and then we go over to the marketing section in iTunes. Again, I'm very proud that if you scroll down to marketing here, one of the shows that's featured on this little initial tab is indeed the YouTube Creators Hub podcast. Now, I've worked hard. I'm very proud of that. I'm not boasting. I'm just showing you that what SEO and what keyword research can do on iTunes, because you're going to utilize iTunes and Spotify and Google Play just like you would Google search or YouTube. So another great question, and I hope that answer helped you out just a little bit. All right, so question coming in from Rick over at Smart Drive Test. Would a podcast about driving and what's in the media work, or having interviews with those in the driving industry or attached to the commercial driving industry? I absolutely believe it would work. I think that if you're in that space, if you're in that niche, there isn't something that is too small or too niche. A lot of times, Rick, those shows that are much more niched down, those are the shows that do even better, because those are the shows that have those rabid audiences that are willing to buy anything you recommend. They're willing to, so that makes bringing on sponsors and podcast, people much easier than it would be if you had a much broader podcast topic. So absolutely it would work. Just use a couple of those tips that I told you in the beginning, and I think you're going to find it to be very much successful. So great question though. So let's see here. Adriana said, how can I monetize my podcast? It's not clear for me. Sorry. I think I answered that probably the best way that I possibly knew how. But basically it boils down to just getting sponsors to come on the show, getting people who are willing to come on the show that trust you to promote their products well, and then a crowdfunding site like Patreon is another good tool as well. If you go to Anchor, they actually have a new feature where they will actually help you find sponsors for your show. Again, you'd have to ask Eileen about that. She would know more about that. But sponsors, crowdfunding, merchandise, things like that, very easily done when it comes to doing it that way. All right. This is a great question. What is the ideal length for a podcast? So I've said before that the sweet spot for me, and the beauty of podcasting, Rick, is that there is no set format that you have to go by. That's why I love podcasting. The TubeBuddy Express show is about an 8 to 10 actionable tip every single Friday, whereas the YouTube Creators Hub podcast is every Wednesday or Thursday. I try to do Wednesdays. That's another thing. Try to stick and stay consistent on a schedule. It's going to have the same benefits as on YouTube for video. But I like 10 minutes for short-term, more frequent podcasts, and about 30 minutes for like my interview show. Now, I've also found that people like Tim Ferriss do 2-hour-long marathon podcasts, and they do very well. You really got to find what best fits your content, right? So if you're doing stuff in the commercial automotive industry, you may find that 20 or 30-minute podcast episodes are the sweet, perfect fit. But maybe you can't get all of the questions out to your guest or whatever, then you need to increase that, right? So again, great question. You need to find the length that works well for you. Right? Like this isn't a thing like on YouTube where right now YouTube seems to be preferring longer videos, and the watch time thing really doesn't, it doesn't go into play with podcasts as far as like listening time and things like that. So great question. We are well into the stream, and you guys have absolutely knocked it out of the park. You guys have killed it. I really do appreciate you stopping by today. This has been so much fun. So for the last little bit of the stream, I'm going to take what I like to call rapid fire questions, where you basically rapid fire some questions in chat. If I can see them, I may not be able to get to all of them, but I can see them. I will try to answer them as quickly as possible. Try to keep them related to podcasting, but if you want to ask me questions about YouTube, obviously that's what I cover as well. So please start putting those questions in chat, and I'll try to get to those as quickly as possible. Become a Prime says Dusty is using one of my favorite microphones. Yes, the Shure SM7B is indeed one of my favorites as well. Thank you, Mike. Yeah, tweet the stream. That'd be great. You guys are wondering about my cup here. My daughter has bedazzled my cup. So, yeah. 3 keywords to have a successful podcast. Consistency, quality, content. There you go. That was 3, right? I'll take it. I'll take it. Matt Lane Fitness in the house. One of my favorite people. How are you, Matt? It's good to see you. Hopefully you're doing well today. Tommy says, is it possible to have a monetarily successful live-only stream? How? Probably so. But in order to even live stream, you got to reach certain parameters on YouTube, so you got to do it a little bit. You got to have some type of uploaded video presence on the platform. Something I'm boiling around or bouncing around is I'd like to do like a daily live show, like on my YouTube channel, where the people get to submit the topics that we cover, whether it be technology or YouTube or media or podcasting. I don't know, it'd be cool to do like my own live TV show on YouTube. There's a lot of things that go into that. How YouTube handles live streaming now. When I live stream, I tend to lose subscribers because of the way the algorithm, there's a lot of things to that. But I do believe with super chats, with memberships coming down the pipeline, and with YouTube trying to help you out, absolutely. Shelly says, does your daughter take commissions? No, she doesn't. She'd do it for free. She loves to bedazzle anything. All of these panels behind me, the ones that are missing, she's working on them. She's going to decorate them for me. It's going to be great. Budget question. How much should I cost to outsource things like editing and SEO for my video podcast? Jill, it just depends. I mean, I work with people and my price has gone up. Just to edit like 30 minutes of audio, I think I charge anywhere from $20 to $50 depending on what they want done. Because of my business model, I have people who work under me. One guy specifically who works in the town I live in. And so I get the business, I curate everything, send it to him to edit. I mean, it can range. There's some really cheap ones out there, but I'd be very careful. When I first started, I hired a guy. I'm not going to say where he was located because I don't want to lump everyone into that. I paid him $10 an episode. It was horrific. He got the audio. He slapped an intro, outro. It was done. Be careful about how you do that. Anywhere from $30 to $50 an episode sounds about right. What happens if a company you are hosting through goes out of business? Do you lose those podcasts? Normally, it would be, unless it's a weird situation, say Libsyn goes out of business, they're going to let you know, and then you can, find a new service like Anchor or somewhere that allow you to transition to their provider. Shouldn't be a problem. You shouldn't lose your audio. Again, you should be backing that audio up on an external hard drive that you have as well. So, since YouTube abbreviated sub counts, were there other features removed as well? I mean, they're always tinkering and trying new things. The sub count thing wasn't a big deal for me. Like right now, I have 271,000 subscribers. I don't really care to see that I have 271,222. I understand if you're a smaller YouTuber and you have 1,990 subscribers and you're only getting one every 2 weeks, you want it to look like you have 2K. There's, I understand. Good, Matt. It's good to have you here. I had to step away for a moment. You may have answered. What is your preferred podcast platform outside of YouTube for distribution? I use Libsyn because I know the guys over there. I've always used them. It's very inexpensive and it just works. But Libsyn, Anchor are two of the ones that I would recommend to people getting started. Hey, Drana, do you have an Instagram account? I do, but it's all personal stuff. So if you're interested in my business stuff, I don't have one for that. But if you want to follow me on Instagram, you're more than welcome to. It's dmporter17. If you want to see pictures of my family, that's where I do it there. Dusty, is that counter of yours still working? I think I remember you having one in your room. Yeah, it's this guy right over here. That I thought it would be better than it was, to be honest. I have to go through and reset it every couple of weeks. It's kind of frustrating. It's from Lametrics, I believe, Lametric company or something. They have a new one. It's a whole lot of money. They were going to send me I said no. Not worth it, to be honest. Let's see. At the beginning of my YouTube career, I've tried live streaming my sub count, but YouTube removed it as a spam. Is that a new rule? I wouldn't do that. That's not good content at all. I don't know if it's a rule or if it's a regulation, but it sounds kind of spammy to me, to be honest. I wouldn't do that. Dusty, what do you use to back up your episodes, content, and such? I'm using Dropbox, SSD, portable. I pay, I can't remember the amount right now, but I pay for the Google storage. It's like the Google Drive. I handle everything on Google. From Google Docs to Google Sheets. I love their back-end system. I think I pay them $5 for 2 terabytes. I don't know. I use Google. Dropbox I used to use. I felt like they were kind of charging a little much for what they were doing. And so Google Drive for me is definitely what I would do. That's what I would do. It does still work. It's just, I thought it would be cooler, When I first got it, I had it ding every time I got a subscriber. But if you're getting about 80 or to 100 subscribers a day, all of a sudden you're trying to, I do voiceover work. I'm trying to record voiceover work, and all of a sudden I'm in the middle of a script and I hear a ding, ding. That's not what I wanted to do. So, oh, it's funny. Lametric is so cool, but kind of mega expensive. I want one, but not paying them prices. Yeah, I think there's probably some benefits. You can track your Twitter followers, your Twitch followers, other social outlets or platforms that you possibly could be on. So I could see it being something that could be beneficial. Right now, it's literally just a clock and a date for me. So that's just kind of basically all that it is. So while I do have a little bit of a lull in the questions coming down through chat, if you have a couple, I have time for a few more maybe. I do want to encourage you to, if you haven't already, check out TubeBuddy. I assume all of you here probably already have. But more importantly, check out, I always get that wrong, right? This over here are the podcast, the YouTube Creators Hub podcast, as well as the TubeBuddy Express show. Both of those are released weekly and always have new stuff on the feed. Completely think. Dusty, what has changed for you since starting podcasting to now? Andrew, that's a great question. I think number one, it's more mainstream. People know more of what a podcast is. 2015 and 16, when I started talking about I podcast, people at podcasts, it's like even now when I say I'm a YouTuber, you guys know this, right? You get that look of, oh, you're a YouTuber, I'm sorry, right? It's like, people who have so-called normal jobs. But when I mention podcasts now, people are like, oh yeah, I listen to that. I listen to this podcast. Like it's just a normal thing. I think, now that it's becoming more and more integrated with, say, new cars now have the Apple CarPlay and the Google as well, where you can play podcasts just like radio straight through the radio. I think more and more people ask me, do you think podcast is on a downward trend? I think no. I think just like YouTube, I think we're on that trajectory upwards. I think that right now we haven't even reached the precipice of that just yet. I think podcasting is only going to be to be better and get even more prevalent. So good question though. And obviously I know more about it now. I feel more comfortable talking about it. Neil said, Dusty, if you had to choose streaming or podcasting but could only do one, what would you choose? I don't know. That's a good question. It puts me in a position to where those are kind of like my two babies, and I really don't want to choose between the two. But I guess if I had to, I'd probably choose podcasting just because, I don't know, streaming has its benefits too. The only thing with streaming is that, like right now, streaming this to you guys, I could make a mistake. I could say something that you could go back on later and be like, oh, did you hear what that dummy said on the stream? When you do a podcast and it's you can edit the show, you can kind of put out there what you want to put out there. And so that's kind of why I would pick podcasting. But streaming is such an amazing thing that I can stream here to 50 to 75 of you guys today, and you can bounce questions off of me back and forth. There's something about that live interaction that television just doesn't have that I think is amazing. So probably podcasting, but streaming has its place. Mike said, I'm like the Neo Geo of podcasts. I was podcasting in 08. That is amazing. I don't know when I released the first episode of the YouTube Creators Hub podcast. Let's see here. Yeah, back in early 2014, so it's almost 6 years ago now. A lot has changed. I mean, the times have changed. The way we do it is completely different. So, that's kind of where we're at. Well, guys, we are 10 minutes out now from the ending of the stream. I'll probably end it here in the next few minutes if I don't get some more questions. But I do want to thank all of you. What an amazing stream this has been. I do want to thank Andrew, all of the mods that have come in. It's been amazing to have all of you guys here watching. We've been averaging about 50 viewers. That is amazing at this time of day, so early on the West Coast. You guys are so kind. I don't have the internet for live streaming or podcasting. However, it's good enough for voice chatting in Discord. Would podcasting in Discord be a great idea? I've got a video showing you how to utilize Discord for podcasting. A lot of people are actually moving to Discord as their primary interview type platform. You just bring in a person on a call and you just record that through an audio recorder. So yeah, if you can call and chat with someone on Discord, you just record the call and do it that way. So probably something that you can get into if that's something. Lucas, how can you make a good stream with OBS? I've got a bunch of great videos myself. So does Nick. So does other creators out there showing you how to do that. Andrew said, Discord hates me. Some days Discord loves me. Other days Discord hates me. I don't know, right? Like it's one of those things to where it's, I don't know. I live in there because I have a Discord channel and I communicate with most of the people through Discord. It's a great tool, but man, how frustrating it can be, whether it's losing the call or whatever it may be. I don't know. Dusty is the king of OBS. I don't know about the king, but I'm trying. I'm trying my best. If you were to start a new podcast today, would it be with video or pure audio? Due to my setup and where I am located and kind of how I have my studio set up for voiceovers, probably just audio. I think that it's one of those things to where, I have my setup looking really good behind me, how I like it to look, but it's not a professional type studio or video. Now, over on this side is where I film all my stuff for YouTube, and I do other stuff over there. But my live streaming stuff, I'd have to rearrange some stuff. And there's something about having just a purely audio show. So, what is your biggest lesson you've learned in your time podcasting? Probably that if you are consistent, the people will come. You know, a lot of people record 30 episodes of a podcast over, a year time span, and they're getting some decent momentum, but around episode 31 and 32, they decide to, it's called pod fading. I'm deciding to go longer and longer in between the podcast, and eventually they don't upload anymore, or it's very sporadic. And next thing you know, they've lost all momentum, and the podcast just dies. And so consistently growing a podcast, kind of where I would go there. So really cool, really cool. How to grow from scratch. This is my gaming channel, and I need to grow it. There's a lot of great stuff that you can find out there to do that. All right, so we are reaching the end of this stream. We are at an hour. Shelly says, I'm guilty of pod fading. I do want to encourage you guys. Something I'm trying this stream is immediately after this stream, a couple of minutes, go to the bathroom. I'm going to be going live on my channel to do some follow-ups, more personal stuff. It's more of a laid-back stream, so if you're interested in that, it's just Dusty Porter on YouTube. This is something that I've wanted to do in times past. I haven't had the time, so after this stream is over here on the TubeBuddy channel, I will be going live on my personal YouTube channel, so it's just Dusty Porter over there, and I'll be answering any questions you have over there, maybe even covering some topics you may want to cover, if that's something you want to do for about 30 or 45 minutes. So if that's something you're interested in, definitely check me out there. Thanks again to Andrew. Thanks again to TubeBuddy. What an amazing, amazing opportunity we've had to get on here and talk about podcasting. Hopefully you guys we'll start a podcast if you haven't already. Please, I'm crossing my fingers. You will. I'm begging you. If you have that voice inside of you, do it. Start a podcast. I think it's going to be it's going to be amazing. So, all right, Andrew, thank you guys. Thanks for really hanging out with me today. Thanks for helping me out and making this stream very interactive. And I will talk to you guys in the next stream, which is a couple minutes from now. Bye, guys.